And this traumatic moment I went through when I was like a kid, there's a few of them actually. And I remember being in a session with my therapist, and my therapist was like to me, okay, so we're gonna walk back to this traumatic moment. You're an adult and you're going into this place that this traumatic thing happened to you. So let's walk into, and like, I'm an adult, I'm really scared, I'm really afraid. And in that moment I realized that the 8-year-old version of me that this happened to is now back. So I'm not a 29. At that point I was 29, so I'm not a 29-year-old going into that room. I'm an 8-year-old girl going in. So the first time we did this kind of exercise, I panicked. I was like, I need to get out. I was like suffocating. It's like I was like having a panic attack in the therapy session. I was like, I need to leave, I need to get out, I can't do it. She's like, I'm with you, I've got you. I'm like, no, let's. Like be driving me crazy, like, and my friends be like, it's not that deep, right? And the fam be saying, you're in your feelings, what? All I know is life is raggedy. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Reforming Pessimist podcast. This is your girly Abanga Lydia. How are you all doing? It's good to be back. It's good to be back. It's good to be back. Oh my god, another episode. Let's do this. Actually, let me just make sure I'm prepared with my material because I don't want to forget anything. But anyway, so I've been going through this phase like with old school R&B, and I have been listening to Shy, and just listening to these late 90s, early 2000s R&B and just living my best life with them, just enjoying the music. I'm such a music buff. I love music so much. It means a lot to me. Right now, my favorite song is Messiah by Sarkodie. And what is my guy's name? It's a Ghanaian song. And honestly, every time I listen to that song, I feel like the baddest beat. I feel like I want to fight a bitch. I feel like nobody can say shit to me. You know what I mean? Sarkodie be out here be doing his thing. But hold on, let me find the other artist. So it's Sarkodie Kweku Flick called Messiah, and it makes me feel so empowered. That's such an amazing song. And also another song that I am jamming to right now is by Unknown Immortal Orchestra. They are this kind of indie rock band, I think. And there's this song called That Life. And guys, every time that song come on, I'm like, go listen to it. It's such a fun upbeat song. It just makes me so happy. It makes me so happy. It makes me feel like, oh, life is so joyous. Pepping myself when I go for my walks. I'm like pepping to it, like it's the best. It's the best. I hope you guys have all been good. I hope you're doing well. It's good to be back on another episode to just rant, talk about shenanigans and healing. The best part of it, the worst part of it, the not so great part of it. Who knows? Anyway, it's good to be back. It's good to be back. I hope you've all been good. I've been doing well. So let's just quickly jump into check in and let's just get into the episode because, again, I have a lot to say. I have a lot to say. Raggedy. So raggedy. Okay, so check in. How am I doing? I'm doing really well, actually. I'm doing really great. I'm in a great place. I'm recovering. I'm healing. I'm seeing progress and improvement from whatever challenging time I had before. I'm doing really well. I'm really working hard to protect my space and protect my peace and my sanity and my joy and my happiness. And I'm just working on my life. There's just so much, and I'm looking forward to this year. So I'm really trying to kind of put a pep in my step and be strategic. Strategic bitch. Come on. A strategic bitch. You have to be one of those. To be able to kind of push myself forward and get myself going where I need to go. So I'm really happy. I'll say, like, in terms of check-in, there's not much to really say. I'm doing really well. I feel like I'm really working on myself. I'm doing all the things that I need to do to basically enhance myself and improve myself and improve my quality of life and make certain dreams a reality, guys. Like, I am in a place for the first time in my life where I am dreaming. I think I talked about it last year when I was doing some of my audio episodes, but I am dreaming for the first time properly, like dreaming for the first time. And it's so surreal and it's just so beautiful to have that, to have a dream. Like Martin Luther King, I have a dream. I should be joking around that. To be dreaming about things, to be just aspiring to certain things. Like before, I used to do things because I was like surviving, even though they were like massive achievements, like they were great achievements. They were mostly based on survival and escaping and, trying to gain power to be able to kind of like sustain myself. And then now all the things that I'm doing it for the sake of self-love, for the sake of joy. All that I'm dreaming about is just for the sake of like just enhancing the quality of my life and just bettering myself and just making myself authentically who I am. This year's tagline, authenticity, authentic. Yes, authentic bitch. Hello, hello, hello. So just enhancing my authenticity, and it's just so wonderful. It's just so wonderful to be able to do that for myself. So yeah, let's continue with the being authentic team this year. We're going to keep that going. It's going to be an ongoing thing. It's not going to change whatsoever. If a bitch has to fight for it, I'll fight for that. So yeah, that's my check-in. Not much to talk about it, but I'm just gonna like get into the episode and start. This is probably going to be a short episode, I hope, because I talk a lot. It's a short one. So this week's episode, this is going to be one of my defense episodes, which I'm really liking. Actually, I'm going to find something that I have to defend every time, because I'm like, oh, I heard about it. I'm like, I'm going to come and defend this, because, and it's not because it's a bad thing or anything. It's just because I feel like some of these things or these wordings, they may be used either as an insult or genuinely as a point blank description of something. And I'm also going to call myself out, because like, you know, just to be honest, because maybe I'm also a little bit sensitive about it, but I'm just defending it because I'm like, oh, let me come defend it, because it's like, you know, there's actually genuine cause to it, because it may not seem as an insult per se. Maybe the person who receives it takes it as an insult, but I think that it's also triggering. It's triggering to people who've been in certain places. So when I say in defense of this, it's probably because it was a trigger or something, and I'm like, okay, let me come here and defend it, because it is something that matters. This week's episode for one of my in defense. What am I defending today? Today, I am here to defend bitterness. Nice. So from a bitter bitch, and I claim it. I was having a conversation, or I was talking to someone, and it's always I was talking to them, because it's an experience with people. And the person was like, oh, you know, you're steeped and stuck in bitterness, and you need to let your bitterness go. And I must say, that triggered me, because I was like, excuse me? What do you mean I am bitter? How dare you? How dare you? Actually, yes, I am a bitter person. I am really bitter. And I'm within my right to be so. But I still didn't want somebody pointing it out to me. Don't point it out to me. I don't want to know. I do not want to know. But all jokes aside though, like, yeah, when they called me bitter, I was like really like triggered by it. And then followed up with bitterness, this person said, you have to forgive and move on. And I was like, okay, now this is where I'm going to fight with you. This is where I'm going to fight with you. There's something about a dismissiveness of someone's experience that fascinates me so much. I think in the sense there's a discomfort to people's experience, particularly if some people were witnesses to it, and either they turned a blind eye to it or they were oblivious, whichever way their position is, right? And also they may have been a participant of these things, and there's always a quickness to encourage and not coerce, manipulate, let's use the words, to get people to either come out of whatever bitterness that you're feeling, forgive and move on, without sometimes putting themselves in the shoes of the person that you're calling bitter and asking for forgiveness from, or asking to forgive, not even from, but asking to forgive whomever the case may be. In this context, it was about somebody else, not that specific person, but asking for them to forgive without having to sometimes do the graceful thing of walking in that person's shoes that they're asking to be so forgiving. Now, I am this person where I say this: forgiveness is for the victim and not for the perpetrator. So if somebody's been a victim of something, the victim shouldn't be coerced, shouldn't be manipulated to forgive and move on, because what the victim has gone through, whomever is seeking that forgiveness or encouragement for the person to move on from, have not lived the victim's life, have not experienced what the victim has experienced, and do not truly understand whatever the perpetrator has done to the victim, how it has impacted, how it's stifled, how he has basically changed the victim's life, the impacts that the victim comes out with from whatever experience that they went through it with the perpetrator. So sometimes for communities, for groups of people to be very quick to push a person or to encourage somebody to forgive, to move on, I think sometimes can in itself be abusive and very manipulative. And I want to do the whole in defense of bitterness, because I think that it will be a really good conversation to have around that, particularly in conjunction with forgiveness as well, and what forgiveness is and who is forgiveness for, right? So I'll start with bitterness first and I'll move on to forgiveness second. And guys, I am thankful to God for AI, because if I think about going back to uni and having to do all of these research, like reading all of these papers, these theses and whatever. Now, I'm not a full support of AI, but I feel like it kind of breaks things down for me easily, which means I have talking point to be able to kind of like basically put my points across and my point of view across. So I want to kind of like get the definition of bitterness, how bitterness can be seen as a form of insult, and in a sense how, you know, AI or whomever AI has stolen from, whatever article or whatever, is basically saying how somebody can move on from bitterness. And based on that, I'm also going to kind of give my point of views and thoughts around that. And then we're going to move on to the second stage and kind of my final thought in my defense of bitterness from a bitter bitch. So according to Cambridge University Dictionary, accredited enough, isn't it? Oh my god. Someone who is bitter is angry and unhappy because they cannot forget about bad things that happened in the past. Now, I will say though that like I'm unhappy. I am very happy actually, like right now. So when that person said to me, I think that's what made me really triggered. And I did go back to them and say that, oh, actually, you know what? I'm really happy right now. Like, so I would say that I'm not bitter, but definitely the anger aspect of it, I am angry. I am very, very angry. I think that like is justified to be somebody who was wronged to be very angry in certain ways, to be very, very angry. You're within your right. And it's actually a good emotion to have. And I think it's an emotion that took me a long time to come into and walk into, because I was kind of avoiding that emotion per se, because I grew up in a culture where womanhood, I think that depending on which culture in the world that you come in, I think there's kind of across the board. I think it's not synonymous to specific cultures in the world per se. You a woman, anger is not associated with femininity. It's like for some reason, if you're feminine, if you're a woman, you're not meant to be angry. You are meant to be demure and calm and loving and just accepting. You're not allowed to have any sort of masculine emotions like anger. You know what I mean? Whatever is done to you, whatever punitive, the punitive things that are done to you, you need to accept it with grace and deal with it. Whatever disrespect you get, you have to deal with it and just not be angry and still be like, dainty, it's fine. Yeah, I'm an angel. And you meet women like that all the time. I've met women like that all the time. I'm an angel. I'm a woman. Particularly tend to be like Christians. I'm judging you, girls. I am judging all of you. Dainty, like, oh, you know, I'm not angry. I just leave it to God. Well, I did not leave it to God. I used to be one of those women. So I'm saying this also laughing at myself because I used to be that person where I gaslit myself, and then I kind of dismissed my own boundaries and my own autonomy and my own entitlement to feeling a way about how I was being treated, by basically saying to myself that you're Christian and you need to let it go because Christianity said to forgive. But guys, Jesus got them flip tables. People disrespected this church, and my guy was like, I am flipping all your tables out here. Jesus was one of the most angry people that you ever meet as a man. And in terms like, I think it's accepted because it was Jesus, but I think when you're a woman, that is not the case. You're not allowed to be angry. So in a sense, I think that said, I am angry, but I am not unhappy. I would say that. So like that's the difference. I'll say, so I wouldn't know if I'm like half bitter. Would you call it half bitterness or not so bitterness? But anyway, and so like I then go on to find out, like, you know, about the bitterness in terms of bitterness being an emotion, because it's like, you know, bitterness is like an emotion. It's like something that we emoting and we expressing and stuff like that. Was it called Psychology Today was basically explaining that, like, you know, in some cases they want to see bitterness as kind of like a mental illness per se, but I think that when bitterness become like something, it's like a depression where depression stop your life, or anxiety where anxiety stop your life. Bitterness can also stop someone's life where they're so bitter and they're so angry and so unhappy in their bitterness that it stops their life and in terms of doing anything. And I have also seen an example of that. I've seen somebody steeped in their bitterness so much because they were done so wrong and they just couldn't move on from it. Like they just couldn't move on from it. And I sometimes go back, and my thing about when people are expressing certain emotions, expressing certain feelings, or expressing certain things that they've experienced is to take myself back. I think that that's one thing I loved about doing sociology so much, and particularly when I started doing sociology in college, is that one thing about sociology was always about taking yourself out of your own environment, of your own biases, of all your own like foundations that you've been set, and actually walking in someone else's shoes, someone who's from a different social class, someone who's from a different culture, who's of a different gender, who doesn't fit certain social who doesn't fit in a certain social structure, who doesn't have entitlement to certain social powers, who doesn't have certain privileges. Imagine yourself in those people's shoes, and how would you be able to express yourself, to feel, act, and behave? And a lot of the time, so many of us will be like, well, I wouldn't do that. Did you put yourself in their shoes? Well, you know, I have have you imagined going through something like that, in terms of whatever they share with you, whatever they experience, and maybe thought, if this was me and I was allowing myself to be myself. Is this something that will be within my bandwidth that I can tolerate? Because again, I think we walk in a world where we like to dismiss. We like to be very quick to dismiss people's experience, what people have been through, because it's comfortable for us to be able to avoid the repercussions of it, rather than actually maybe sometimes taking a break and be like, oh, yeah, maybe I can see their point of view. I may not agree completely with their behavior or how they went about it, how they did this or whatever, but I can empathize and I can sympathize, and in a sense I can give them grace. You know what I mean? It's not like it's perfect or anything, but I can still give them grace. And I think that's kind of the person I am. So it's who I am and how I kind of view the world. And in some cases people would describe me as an empath, I would say, you know. But yeah, that's how I work. So psychologists today said that like emotional bitterness refers to feeling of sadness, resentment, and anger, especially anger that accumulates over time. Accumulates over time. So it says also that it's a secondary emotion outside of sadness, happiness, fear, anger, and surprise and disgust that can result from insult or injury. Bitterness is a secondary emotion, because the first thing that the person feel before the bitterness comes, right, is that they're feeling fear, they're feeling anger, they're feeling disgust. These are all the primary emotions that come up. And before they have gotten to bitterness, this has been, again, like they said in psychology today, over time. So this is a repetitive behavior, something has been going on for so long, over and over again, for a very long time. And therefore, it gets to and again, like for us pessimists out here, this is real, right? You experience something over and over and over and over and over again, and you accept that this is what the reality is, this is what it is. But instead of like accepting that this is actually unique and singular to this one experience, it becomes across the board where you basically spread it. You'll be like, oh, okay, all people are like, you start to generalize, because it becomes so stark to you. And most of these experiences we're experiencing were like, you know, people who we're really close to. So it's not like, you know, an outside person, because when it's an outside person, the emotional impact is not really that much. Somebody to have that much emotional impact on you where you're really bitter about it, has to be something that's really close to us, something that means a lot to us, something that we connect to, we love, we are very much of a value is of a value to us. We value so much. So in my experience, I would say that like, yes, I was definitely, there's a lot of sadness. Oh, also resentment, a lot of resentment. But also the resentment, I've kind of like worked on them and kind of let them go, because I felt like the resentment didn't really serve me per se. I feel like being resentful is kind of like a wasted energy. Being resentful, it's not going to change the narrative. It's not going to change the history. It's not going to change what happened. It's not going to change what I went through. So I don't waste my energy on resentment. But the sadness, for sure, still feel it, because it's like it's an ebb and flow, and the sadness is kind of like it's equivalent to grief, and grief is like, I always say grief is continuous, right? And the anger is also like it's continuous, because it's like you get triggered into something, you remember something, you know, you remember an experience, you go back to an experience that you felt a way about in that moment, but you didn't really allow yourself to express anger, and particularly if you don't know how to express your emotions or be in your emotion, particularly as a woman, when you never allowed yourself to feel anger ever, and for the first time of you're feeling anger, so you go back to a certain memory, you're like, I should have been angry about it, so let me be angry now. I deserve to be angry now. I want to punch that person. Guys, anger is such an amazing emotion. Anger, oh my god, I love anger. I love being angry. Yes. And if you're gonna call me an angry raccoon, I will accept that, because I deserve to be angry about all the microaggressions. Like, look, I deserve to be angry about that. I am a human being too, god damn it. God damn it. Anger is a beautiful emotion, because I feel like anger is a release emotion. And there's somebody in particular in my life who I love so much, who taught me how to be angry, because they allow themselves to be angry. And in a sense, I respect them so much for always allowing themselves to be angry and fighting, because before, like, their anger, in a sense, it overwhelmed me. It was an emotion I wasn't really familiar with. It was an emotion I was never allowed to really be steeped in, because you weren't allowed to be that kind of emotion. So when I used to see them, and also they're a different gender to me, they're a guy and I'm a woman, so it's like different. When they like got angry, I was like, oh my god, like I was like overwhelmed by it. I was tired of it, because I'm like, this is too much. But then as I got older, I started to value and really appreciate and respect their anger, because I was like, oh my goodness, like the fact that you were allowing yourself to express your emotion in a certain way where you're like, no, you've crossed my boundary. No, you've basically like taken advantage of here. No, you've basically like, violated me here, and I'm not going to allow you to violate me. I'm going to be angry about it. I'm going to let you know that what you're doing is wrong. It was like something that I really rated. And it's something that I never allowed myself to do, because I was like, I just accepted. When boundaries are crossed, I just accepted. When I got violated, I just accepted. It was just like that. And this traumatic moment I went through when I was like a kid, there's a few of them actually. And I remember being in a session with my therapist, and my therapist was like to me, okay, so we're gonna walk back to this traumatic moment. You're an adult and you're going into this place that this traumatic thing happened to you. So let's walk into, and like, I'm an adult, I'm really scared, I'm really afraid. And in that moment, I realized that the 8-year-old version of me that this happened to, is now back. So I'm not a 29. At that point, I was 29. So I'm not a 29-year-old going into that room. I'm an 8-year-old girl going in. So the first time we did this kind of exercise, I panicked. I was like, I need to get out. I was like suffocating. It's like I was like having a panic attack in the therapy session. I was like, I need to leave. I need to get out. I can't do it. She's like, I'm with you. I've got you. I'm like, no, let's get out. And then I then, after the session, reflected over it, because it's an uncomfortable place. So sometimes you leave therapy, and one of my amazing friends here, she coined it this way. She's called it therapy hangover, which is like a really, really cool way to describe it. It's a therapy hangover. She said, you come out therapy and you have all of this hangovers like stuff. So like one of the therapy hangovers, and I'm now reflecting. I'm like, okay, so I'm a 30-year-old walking into this room. Why am I scared? And why am I afraid? And why? And then now funnily enough, I went to the office, I went to work, and this was during the summer. And, there were these kids who probably would have been the age that I was when this traumatic thing happened to me. And they're playing and they're having fun. And I'm just sat there watching these kids be so innocent and be just so happy and having fun and playing in this like water fountain that's like in the middle of where my office is. And I'm not imagining myself physically at that age, looking that tiny, looking that vulnerable, and just being in a position that I was in. And guys, that was the first time I allowed myself to be angry. And anger is such a powerful emotion, because it can also be very dangerous, because in that moment, I was like, okay, I want to kill someone, like kind of emotion. It went from like one extreme where I felt nothing to the opposite of like, I want to fuck somebody over. Like, I want to, you know. And that was kind of the awakening of my anger. And since then, I'm grateful, because now I get angry about a lot of things. So I think that when that person expressed that, oh, I was bitter, they were definitely right in terms of like my anger, that bitterness was there. But at the same time, they were incorrect in terms of like, if I was like unhappy, because I wasn't unhappy, I was actually truly, truly happy. And in a sense, I think I was trying to reach out to that person to connect, and also be able to kind of express myself and get them to see me from a point of view, and also ask for some favors from them. So that was very triggering. And your girl went back with a very angered response, but measured. Very measured, because I like to be that way. I like to be that way. So there was that bit when I was called bitter. And I think that the reason why I kind of expressed this and I put myself and I tell stories about myself is that, in my defense of bitterness, is that people are allowed to be bitter, guys. Like, people are truly, truly allowed to be bitter. Like, we are within our rights to be bitter. And to call someone bitter, or to tell somebody that they are bitter without validating and being like, you are bitter, I understand why you're bitter, and you're within your right to. And end it there. And end it there. End it there. That's it. But there is a dismissiveness of the reason for the bitterness, when on the other side, people are then asked to be forgiven. And I think that this is how it becomes an insult. And this is how it can be very triggering to a lot of people who've either gone through, trauma experiences, who've been, victims of certain perpetrators. There is like an anger that there is a trigger and an anger that comes out of those people, where in a sense it's like you're being dismissed. I'll speak to this and say that sometimes a lot of this is cultural, where like I'm West African, like emotional things are not really a thing in our culture like that. We don't do emotions, you know what I mean? Like emotional maturity, emotional intelligence is not really something that we harper on, or we really, how do I even put it? We really like, focus on or encourage or perpetuate. It's not something that we do in our culture. It's just not something that we do at all. Or maybe in my case, maybe I might be wrong in terms of like my circle or my bubble that I grew up in. That's kind of how it was the case. But I do see commonalities across the board in terms of like different people from their own communities and stuff like that. So that is like really and truly real. And then also there is a lack of confrontation of self, because I think that a lot of our communities, our elders, our history is very much that we do not confront certain harmful practices and behaviors that we perpetuate in there. So this person I was speaking to in particular, they're like, they're an older person, they are a grown person, like somebody who I respect a lot, like, I have so much respect for. And they themselves, you realize that they themselves, they've never allowed themselves to be emotional about their own things, or feel a way about their own things, or be really angry about their own things, or be really bitter in their case about their own things, because again, they've had to let go. And another thing as well is that they're also women. They're also women as well. So in those cases, like, I have so much grace. I have so much grace for them, because I'm like, their point of view and what they are allowed to be in terms of authenticity, in terms of expression and stuff like that, is also stifled as well. Probably in a worse case than I would have had it as a woman growing up in the 90s and 2000 in the 90s and noughties, whilst for them they're probably growing up in the 50s and 60s. It's like a very different experience. 50s, 60s and 70s, like a very different experience to mine. So there's so much way that like they've found their own way to be able to deal with life and kind of go through life and find ways to accept things in life. And I have to commend women like that for how they've basically got themselves to survive to get here, because the world is very unfair to a lot of women, like very, very unfair to a lot of women. And so like in those moments, I'm like, I give a lot of grace. I give a lot of grace, knowing that like, intentions are like, they're not to harm, but they're trying to be like, this is how I did it to survive. This is how I did it to get here, to get to where I need to get to. And therefore, this is how I'm kind of going to like, counsel and advise you. And for us young women as well, who are in my generation, you basically push back and kind of encourage them to change that narrative. There's a beautiful conversation I had with a friend where they were talking about, the kind of um, cultural values that their mom instilled in them that they still carry to this day, because of a response that they had to something that I told them. And I was like to her that like, even though that's the case, it shouldn't be the case for you. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you could definitely change your perspective. And it's not like we can really change our elders' perspective of certain things and how they view the world. But I think that there's a beauty in education, a beauty in telling them about, narratives and things that they also carry in biases and, indoctrinations that they've also like taken on board. And it's not like they're going to be completely new women and they're going to be part of certain things, because they're who they are. You can't change people when they're in their 60s and 70s and stuff like that. You can't do that. But what you can do is give them perspectives. And if they're very introspective people, if they're open-minded, they'll be able to kind of see, understand, and be respectful of you as a person. And in this case, I think that that's kind of the back and forth conversation I had with the person. However, there was the other bit that, when they said forgiveness, that I felt, oh, that is when you're being dismissive. And now let's look into forgiveness as the next part of the topic, and the definition of forgiveness, and also what other people have to say about forgiveness. So forgiveness is seen as an act of letting go of resentment and giving someone a second chance, right? Even if they have wronged you. It's a process that involves changing your feelings and behavior towards a person that hurt you, right? And I think that will be a simplistic definition to forgiving somebody that is not harmful, forgiving somebody that is not detrimental to your well-being and your quality of life and your way of living and stuff like that. So it's kind of learning to be able to differentiate between those two. And I think for people who've really been impacted by certain people in particular, when they explain experiences to others who may not have walked in your shoes or understand the experience or something like that, I think there's a quick ask to forgive, because again, we like to compare apples to oranges and watermelons to pineapples and all of that stuff, because we think that everything is the same. And one thing I always do say that, like, there's a complexity to human behavior, complexity to people's existence, complexity to everything. So sometimes simplifying things to make it easier for yourself is not a good thing, and it's not healthy. And basically in terms of the people that you end up being in relationship with, or the person that you end up communing with. And so when somebody does bring something to you for counseling or for conversation, is to maybe ask more questions. And if you do not understand, just say that I do not understand. And also sometimes put yourself in their shoes and be like, okay, how would I deal with this if this was me and if I was in your position? And also asking the person, what do they want? You know what I mean? Because the person's input is really, really important. I feel like it's really good for people who are in relationship with people who are healing, who are recovering from traumatic experience, who've been victims of certain perpetrators, to really meet the victims where they are at. If the victim says this, accept that. If the victim says, like, you know, I don't want to do this, accept that and respect that. And the reason why I say is because the victim themselves, or whomever have been harmed or affected, they're also going through their own process. They're also going through their own journey to heal themselves, to recover, and to be something. And sometimes coercing or pushing or trying to get people to move out of whatever bitterness, and let's call it what it is, whatever bitterness that they're in, can be very harmful to that person and their journey and their development as well. It's kind of walking with the person on the journey, whatever journey that it may be, where in some cases, some people may arrive at, you know, giving the person a second chance because they've been wronged. And in some cases, some people never do, because the violation was too extreme. The harm was really, really massive, and there's no going back. And it still doesn't mean that the person has not given up on resentment, or they're still resentful. It could be that the person is not as resentful. Like for myself, like I'm not resentful, but at the same time, so they may not want to have a relationship with the person or whatever. It could be whatever the situation may be, and whomever the person who was harmed or wronged was, that is their position to be able to do that. And my response to the elder that I had a conversation with, I particularly said to them, like, look, forgiveness is not for my perpetrator. The forgiveness is for me. I forgive for myself. I forgive to release myself. And that's another bit of the next stage in terms of what does forgiveness does for us, and what does forgiveness basically do, which is that forgiveness help you in terms of letting go. In terms of forgiveness as well, what involves is that it brings in empathy and compassion, and also accepting, and then moving on. And in all those three stages, for myself in particular, I'll say that I've kind of like gone through all of that, where I let go in a sense, but not forgotten. I had empathy for the person who caused me harm, a lot of empathy for the person who caused me harm, mostly because I kind of knew their beginning, their genesis, what they'd been through, and so much and so forth. So I was able to give a lot of grace when it came to that. I had a lot of compassion for them in terms of the position that they were in as well. And I accepted, and the acceptance came in terms of being radical about things, accepting the good, the bad, the ugly, the evil, accepting it all, and coming to a place of a decision where I was like, okay, how do I move on, where in terms of moving on is beneficial to me and is helpful to me and is much more impactful to my well-being and how I do well in life and how I get to live a better life and have a good quality of life per se. And I think that that's again the misconception when it comes to forgiveness, is that people expect you to move on, let go, and still expect things to be the same way. When you're letting go and you're moving on and putting boundaries in place, where like, okay, these are things I'm not willing to accept and tolerate anymore. It comes as a shock to a lot of people, because you're like, oh, but I was expecting to go back to the way the things. And I'm like, no, it's not. Like, I've forgiven, I've accepted, and I'm moving on. But in a way that is suitable to me, in a way that is beneficial to me, in a way that, you know, enhance my joy, enhance my happiness, enhance my own quality of life and my well-being, and protects me in a sense. So yeah. And there's psychology today in particular, where they say forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. Now, when you go to psychologists, they're talking. Now repeat it again. Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. One doesn't have to return to the same relationship or accept the same harmful behaviors from an offender. I hope my people are hearing it. You guys know that I'm very self-serving, so this episode is probably targeted at somebody, but basically it's a defense of something. And also, they also say that like forgiveness is virtually important for the mental health of those who have been victimized. It propels people forward rather than keeping them emotionally engaged in an injustice or trauma. Forgiveness has been shown to elevate mood and enhance optimism and guard against anger, stress, anxiety, and depression. And I think that this is where I am, guys. Like, I have forgiven and I have moved on. I have forgiven and I have moved on. And I think that that's the kind of offense I took to the response that came in. And that why I wanted to defend bitterness is because I think that in the person that I was communicating with, hearing me express myself fully about the situation that I was in, I think that they just read it that way, and they could have actually maybe like prodded more or asked more questions or had more conversations with me to see where I was mentally in that moment. But again, like I said, we live in a different world, like different generations, different styles of communication and stuff like that. And they didn't seek to ask more to be like, okay, where are you actually in terms of your stage of life? Like, where are you? I think that what they couldn't see or they maybe could not understand is that like I had actually forgiven the person. In all honesty, I just like accepted that like this is how things are, and I have decided like, you know, this is what things are going to be like, and how do I basically serve myself more and bring myself more joy and bring myself more happiness and live a better life, like, you know, live a really good life and live a happy life. And I think that the kind of juxtaposition of those two, I don't think that like the person truly understand. But I do this episode to say that like bitterness is real and everybody's entitled to be bitter depending on whatever way that you've lived life and how you've been treated by some people in your life or outside of your life. This could be a job scenario, guys. Like, a lot of people leave certain jobs bitter at their managers because their managers were assholes. We know it. A lot of us have that experience, you know what I mean? A lot of us leave familiar relationships with bitterness, we leave friendships with bitterness, we leave a lot of things that is part of like, you know, human connections with bitterness. Bitterness is real, it's normal, but let's not push forgiveness. Let's not push forgiveness onto someone, because at the end of the day, it's not, forgiveness is never for the perpetrator. It's always for the victim, and how they choose to do that is their choice. Nothing about the perpetrator, because at the end of the day, the perpetrator is the one who is causing harm, not the victim. And another thing, let's not put responsibility on the victim to be the one that fixes things. Let's not do that. That is very, very harmful. That is very, very, very harmful. You know what I mean? In a sense, sometimes a victim get harmed, and we expect the victim to be the one that fix it and resolve it and make things better and be the one that's less difficult. And that is very, very, very harmful. Like, you know, if we're part of communities that enable this and perpetrate, I hope that we really encourage ourselves to stop doing that, because it's not good for the victim. We are all trying to create healthy worlds and healthy places for all of us to exist and coexist in and be in. We're all trying to create joyful and, you know, safe spaces, in particular safe spaces for a lot of us out here. And let's work together to be able to maintain those safe spaces without being dismissive, without acknowledging people's experiences. Everybody's experience matter. And I know culture sometimes dictates certain things where we're like, because of culture, it needs to be this way, you know, because of whatever hierarchies that are in place, it needs to be that way. And because of that, those cultures, those hierarchies can end up distancing, can end up breaking apart communities, relationships, and so much and so forth, because some people get to a place where they just can't handle it anymore. They just can't take it anymore. They just can't do anything about it anymore. And the best thing that they can do about it is sometimes stepping away and walking away from a lot of things to be able to protect themselves, their peace, and their sanity. You know what I mean? So I hope this is in defense of all my folks out here who are seen as bitter. You're within your right to be bitter. You're allowed to be. There's a reason why you're bitter. There is. There is, and it's okay that you are there. And hopefully one day you get to a place of not a lot of resentment, that your anger is healthy, and that, you know, you've kind of forgiven and moved on. Moved on in a way that is suitable and fitting for you and beneficial for you and is good for you. um, yeah. I hope this episode is like, you know, serving. And again, I always say, I hope it validates you. I hope it encourages you. I hope it gives you like strength whilst you're going through your own healing journey. I'm trying to share as much as I can, and a lot of experience that I go through. This is like really therapeutic for me, and I'm really expressing a lot and talking about a lot. So it brings me a lot of joy, and I want to really dispel a lot of like cultural narratives and a lot of like perceptions that we have in place because of like the kind of world that we built for ourselves. We made this world, we created this culture, and we can change it whatever way we want to change it to be. You know what I mean? And this doesn't come from modernization or whatever. It's just because we're evolved like species. We're evolving constantly, and we can't stick to old traditions when the world is becoming more evolved, education is becoming bigger, we're doing more research, there's more and more studies coming out here about human behavior and mental health and all of that stuff. Let's adapt that into our cultures now and let that also seep into our culture so that we can have a healthy environment, particularly for the kids that are coming up. Like, you know what I mean? For the kids that are coming up so that they have better lives than some of us, like better experiences for some of us. Like when I think about the person I was having a conversation where the generation that she came from, the things that she had to experience as a woman, and I see myself as a woman now, and I see the commonalities of so many of the experiences that we're having, because again, a lot of toxic, harmful cultural practices are still in place. So yeah. Anyway, I hope this episode is quite helpful to you all. And yeah, we're evolving, we're getting better. Things are getting better. Honestly, things are getting better because I feel so empowered enough to be able to sit here and talk about it. We've evolved. We've evolved because before women couldn't do that, and a lot of us do that more now online and share more and just validate a lot of women and a lot of people out here. So we're doing good. We're doing good. But I hope this is helpful to some of you, and I hope you have a great week. And I can't wait to bring another episode out. And I'm doing these like lip syncs, so I'm gonna try and put them out at the end because I feel like it will lift the episode up depending on how the episode was. I hope it lifts the episode up. So if I put the lip sync that after it, enjoy me being joyful. All right, have a good week. Bye. Just like you. Me and these lip syncs, guys. First time that I saw your bride, your lips said hello, and I said hi. I knew right there you were the one. Guys, I was meant to be a musician in physical attraction, but to my satisfaction, baby, you were more than just a friend. I will be sure that the lady is a friend. If I ever fall in love so true, I will be sure that the lady's just like you. Ooh, baby, yeah. Mama, mama, mama. I need to stop.